The lesson Western intellectual elites refused to learn was endured by China, and today it drives an ambitious economic agenda that began with that country's fall from prosperity to poverty. For hundreds of years, China and India controlled more than half of the world's combined GDP. China's wealth was driven by early innovations and later by trade, desperately sought after by Western nations led by Great Britain. In 1793, the British arrived to China on the Macartney mission to force open ports and greater trade. The request was rebuffed, but ultimately China did engage with trade in England, sending teas, silk, jade, porcelain in return for silver. Now, during this period, 85% of the world's silver was mined in Mexico and Peru. The work was so grueling, though, that it was determined that Africans could handle the rigors better, which ignited the African slave trade. And soon China had 40% of the world's silver. In Europe, panic ensued. The introduction of a medical cure-all, opium, to China began to reverse the flow of silver. Seeing the impact, the emperor took action, but by then it was too little too late, and soon the British demanded China open more ports, and that sparked war. When the first Opium War began, China was 32% of the world's GDP. There was a second Opium War. China lost both, and the combined defeats effectively opened that entire nation up to trade. Eventually, China's decline led to the 1899 Boxer Revolution. In an effort to rid that country of foreigners, an 8-nation alliance squashed that rebellion, but in return demanded the equivalent of $10 billion in silver from the established government as payment. By 1942, China was only 5% of the global GDP. Today, China is on a mission after watching its economic and economy leap over 8 of those nations except one. These days, China is once again taking in the world's wealth, except this time they're accumulating all of that silver in exchange for cheaply made plastics and metals. This time there will be no opium. This time there will be no peasant rebellion. There is a trade war, and it began almost 200 years ago. And this time China is determined to win, and it seems that the West is determined to lose.